Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nightmare Nexus, where the darkness comes alive with spine-chilling stories and eerie tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before beginning, please hit the subscribe button to never miss out on new stories. Today, we will talk about scary camping and deep woods horror stories. So without further ado, let's get started. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of the old SUV as three friends, Emily, Jake, and Sarah, ventured deeper into the woods than they'd ever dared before. They had spent weeks planning this trip, promising each other an escape from the mundane routines of daily life. The chosen campsite was an isolated spot far from the usual camping areas, rumored to offer a view of the clearest night skies. But that wasn't its only rumor. Locals whispered about strange happenings in the area. Disappearances, eerie noises, and shadowy figures glimpsed between the trees. Emily had brushed off the stories, calling them campfire fodder, but Sarah couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Jake, ever the skeptic, had laughed it off entirely. By the time they arrived, the sun was beginning to set. Golden light filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. They quickly set up camp, a single tent large enough for three, a fire pit surrounded by stones, and a cooler filled with snacks and drinks. Jake insisted on gathering firewood, while Emily and Sarah organized the gear. As Jake wandered into the trees, Emily lit the fire, its flickering flames pushing back the encroaching darkness. "I'm not sure about this place," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels off." Emily rolled her eyes. "You've been watching too many horror movies. Relax, it's just a quiet forest." Jake returned with an armful of wood, grinning. "And no creepy locals trying to scare us away. See? Totally safe." As the night deepened, they sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Laughter filled the air, and for a moment, Sarah's unease faded. But then came the first sound, a faint rustling in the trees, too heavy to be the wind. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp. Jake shrugged. "Probably a deer or something." But the rustling grew louder, circling their campsite. Emily grabbed a flashlight and aimed it toward the noise. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating only trees and underbrush. "Hello," Emily called, her voice wavering slightly. No answer, just the rustling, now accompanied by the occasional snap of a twig. "Maybe we should call it a night," Sarah suggested, her eyes darting nervously around the perimeter. Reluctantly, they retreated to the tent, zipping it up tightly. Jake joked about bears, but even he seemed tense. They lay in their sleeping bags, the silence outside pressing in on them like a physical weight. Then came the whispering. At first it was so faint they thought it was the wind, but as it grew louder, they could make out words, though not in any language they recognized. The voices seemed to come from all directions, closing in on the tent. Emily sat up, clutching a flashlight. "This isn't funny, Jake. If you set something up to scare us, it's not working." Jake shook his head, his face pale. "I didn't do anything." The whispering stopped. For a brief moment, the forest was deathly silent. Then, the tense fabric bulged inward, as if something unseen was pressing against it. Sarah screamed, and Jake unzipped the tent in a panic, shining his flashlight outside. Nothing. Just the empty campsite, the fire reduced to embers. "We need to leave," Sarah said, her voice trembling. Jake nodded. "We'll pack up and go." They scrambled to gather their belongings, but as they did, the whispering returned, louder and more insistent. Shadows flitted between the trees just beyond the reach of their flashlights. One by one, their electronics, phones, flashlights, even the car keys began to fail. The fire went out entirely, plunging them into darkness. "Stay together," Jake said, his voice firm despite the fear in his eyes. They huddled close, their breaths visible in the suddenly cold air. Then came the footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching the leaves just beyond their vision. "Who's there?" Emily shouted, her voice echoing into the void. No reply. A low growl emanated from the darkness, followed by a guttural voice that rasped, "You shouldn't have come." Panic overtook them, and they ran. Blindly they sprinted into the forest, the beams of their failing flashlights bouncing wildly. The whispering and footsteps pursued them, growing louder and more chaotic. Sarah tripped and fell, screaming as something cold and slimy wrapped around her ankle. Jake and Emily turned back, grabbing her arms and pulling with all their strength. Whatever had hold of her relented, and they stumbled away, Sarah limping. They found a hollowed-out tree and huddled inside, trying to catch their breath. Emily peeked out, her eyes scanning the darkness. The shadows seemed alive, shifting and writhing. "What do they want?" Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. Jake shook his head. "I don't think they want anything. They just are." The growling returned, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of branches snapping. Emily clutched a pocket knife she'd grabbed in their rush to escape. It felt useless against whatever was out there. Then they saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form humanoid but grotesquely elongated. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. It moved unnaturally, as if every joint bent the wrong way. Emily screamed, and the creature lunged toward them. Jake threw himself in its path, shouting for the others to run. Emily and Sarah hesitated, but his desperate cries spurred them into action. They ran until their lungs burned, the forest a blur around them. They didn't stop until they burst into a clearing where the first rays of dawn were breaking through the trees. Collapsing to the ground, they looked back, expecting the creature to emerge. But it didn't. The whispering stopped, and the oppressive feeling lifted. They never found Jake. When they reported the incident to the authorities, a search party was sent out, but no trace of him was ever found. The campsite was empty, their gear untouched. The locals simply shook their heads, muttering about the cursed woods. To this day, Emily and Sarah refuse to speak of what happened in detail. They've moved on with their lives, but neither can shake the feeling that they're being watched, especially when they're alone. And sometimes in the dead of night, Emily swears she hears whispering outside her window. Thank you for watching this chilling tale of survival and terror. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. What would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? Let us know in the comments below. Stay safe, and remember, some places are better left unexplored. See you in the next story.